This happened last summer. I had just turned 32 and wanted to escape the chaos of city life. I decided to spend a weekend alone in a remote cabin in the woods. I loved photography and often looked for natural beauty to capture. This was my chance to unwind. I arrived at the cabin and set up my gear. It was rustic, with creaking floorboards and a stone fireplace. Felt cozy in a way. I spent my days hiking, soaking in the tall trees, and listening to chirping birds. Everything was calm. It was peaceful, but there was a strange stillness around me. Felt a little off, but I brushed it aside. On the second night, I was finally settling down. I wrapped a blanket around myself, my camera resting on the floor. Just as I began to drift off from exhaustion, I heard it. It was faint, but definitely their footsteps crunching outside on the gravel path. My heart raced. I thought maybe it was a deer or a raccoon. I tried to ignore it and fell asleep again. The next day, I spent time taking pictures outside. That's when I noticed something odd. My backpack was shifted from where I had left it. I thought I had moved it in my sleep. But then I saw muddy footprints leading away from my door. A chill settled in my stomach. Had someone been in my cabin? That evening, I heard the footsteps again. They were closer this time, right outside the cabin. I tried to convince myself it was just an animal, but then I heard whispers that felt like they were calling me. Each time I thought I heard my name, it sent chills down my spine. I was scared, but also curious. I wondered if I was imagining things. As the hours turned into days, the footsteps returned regularly. I started to learn their pattern. Felt strange, almost routine. Who was out there? I looked out the window after each noise, but only saw the trees swaying. It was as if someone was watching me. My gut said I wasn't alone anymore. With no other campers around, my unease deepened. By the end of my stay, that feeling of being watched grew stronger. Was it just a prankster? On my last night, I sensed a presence, cold and distant. I looked outside. Just darkness stared back at me. Then I heard it a whisper, "Come out." At that moment, the mystery settled in deeper. I thought it might have been the wind, but it didn't feel like it. I froze, my heart pounding. Was I really alone? Or was something waiting for me just outside? As I lay there, I didn't know what to do. I waited for dawn. The next morning, I gathered my things, still haunted by the whispers. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching me all along. Maybe I would never know what was out there. The mystery remains. As I drove away from the cabin, a sense of relief washed over me. The road wound through the trees, and I thought I was finally leaving that unsettling experience behind. But I couldn't shake off the whispers. They replayed in my mind, an echo that clung to me like the damp air of the forest. A week went by, and life returned to its normal chaos. I tried to focus on work and my daily routine, but I found myself checking the windows more often. I couldn't stop thinking about those footprints. What if whoever or whatever was out there had followed me? I rationalized it was just my imagination, but a part of me wouldn't let go. On a Saturday afternoon, I decided to process the photos I had taken. The digital images flowed onto my computer screen, but there was one photo that caught my attention. I zoomed in. It looked like a shadowy figure standing between the trees in the background of a landscape shot. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't noticed anything when I took the picture. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting. The figure appeared taller than the surrounding trees and seemed to be watching me. I hadn't noticed it while I was out there. Nerves crept up my spine. I felt an urge to go back to rationalize this, to find proof that it was just a trick of light or my imagination. Before I knew it, I had pulled my phone out and was searching for directions to the cabin. Maybe I would just take a quick look. The drive back felt longer this time. Each bend in the road made my stomach twist further. As I arrived, an unease settled over me again. The quiet was deafening. The wind rustled through the trees, and I felt that familiar chill run down my spine. I parked and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the fear that had returned. Approaching the cabin, I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. My heart thumped loudly in my chest. Had I left it that way? I was sure I had locked it. I pushed the door open slowly, stepping inside. The air felt cold, and I immediately sensed a weight in the silence. I glanced around, looking for anything out of place. The camera was still on the floor, and my backpack remained in the corner. Everything appeared untouched. I cursed under my breath, feeling foolish for coming back. Just then, from outside, I heard them again, the footsteps. They were lighter now, almost hesitant, but unmistakable. I rushed to the window, peering out into the thickening shadows of the trees. My breath caught in my throat. Just at the edge of the clearing, I saw the figure from my photo, standing still. Panic struck. It was watching me, almost as if it were waiting for me to make the next move. As fear kicked in, I pulled back from the window. I stumbled backward, trying to process what I had just seen. My heart raced as I realized the whispers had returned, creeping through the cabin like smoke. I could have sworn I heard my name again. Come out. Then, everything went dark. The cabin lights flickered and went out completely, plunging me into a suffocating silence. I was trapped in the dark with whatever was out there. I stood there, heart pounding, surrounded by an abyss of blackness. The silence was suffocating. I fumbled for my phone, praying I didn't find the battery dead. Finally, when the light from the screen flicked on, I felt a small wave of relief. The glow illuminated the walls of the cabin, creating strange shadows that danced around me. I held the phone tightly, trying to quell my racing thoughts. I had to breathe. I had to think. The footsteps continued, faint but lingering. They had shifted closer to the cabin. My pulse quickened. What did they want? I didn't know what to do. Should I stay put or try to escape? I wouldn't risk going outside in the dark, not with that figure lurking. Cautiously, I moved toward the door, the creaking floorboards beneath my feet betraying my every step. I needed a better look, so I crept toward the window. Just before I got there, I heard a rustling sound from just outside. I froze, heart in my throat. The sounds intensified, and suddenly, I heard a low whisper. Come out. My breath caught. It was the same voice I had heard before, wrapping around me like vines, pulling me closer to the door. The urge to step outside battled against my common sense. What if it was a trick? What if it was something worse? I made a choice. I slid down to the floor, back against the wall, using the darkness to hide. My phone's light flickered as if it understood my fear. I held my breath, every nerve ending alive and screaming, waiting for the next sound. Then I spotted movement outside. The figure was closer now. The phone dimmed as I squinted, trying to retain what little battery I had left. It stood still for a moment, its shape contorted and undefined, like it was made of shadows and nightmares. I could feel its presence pressing against the cabin, testing it. A sudden noise jolted me. The door rattled slightly. I barely dared to look, but my curiosity pulled me toward the door anyway. Was it trying to get in? I chewed my lip, frantically thinking of my options. In that moment I remembered my camera. It was still on the floor, and the thought of capturing proof rekindled a flicker of bravery. Maybe I could capture whatever this was. I needed to know. I crawled back to where I'd left my camera, my breath shallow. Just as I reached it, I heard the whisper again. Come out. Felt more demanding now, almost impatient. I raised the camera slowly, the flash feeling like my only weapon. My fingers trembled, but I steadied my hand. If it was out there, if it was real, I would find out. I pointed the camera toward the door, my heart racing as I prepared to take the shot. One deep breath. This was it. And that when I saw it. Across the glass pane, two glowing eyes stared back at me. I felt my pulse drop into my stomach as recognition settled in. I shouldn't have come back. I backed away, but it was too late. The door burst open, and a figure rushed inside. I stumbled backward, my instincts kicking in just as quickly as the figure lunged. It moved like a shadow, its form shifting and swirling. The cabin felt impossibly small, like I was being swallowed by the darkness and dread that overwhelmed me. I fumbled to turn off the camera, but it slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. I didn't stop to pick it up. My heart raced as I ducked to the side, trying to find a place to hide. The figure was faster than I could think, its eyes still glowing like twin lanterns in the dark. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice weak and trembling. I didn't know if it could understand me, but instinct screamed that I needed to assert myself, to show that I wasn't just prey. Paused for a moment, tilting its head. It didn't seem human. The distorted features were unsettling. A grotesque blend of familiar traits mixed with something otherworldly. Fear knotted in my stomach. I had to find a way out. I quickly scanned the cabin. The one window was too high, and the only other door lay behind the figure. Panic threatened to close in, but I couldn't give up. The small space around me was littered with the remnants of past adventures, old fishing gear, chairs, and scattered leaves. I grabbed a loose fishing rod, hoping it might serve as some form of defense. The creature stepped forward, one deliberate stride toward me. It moved with a fluid grace, and every fiber of my being screamed that I needed to act. I swung the rod toward it, putting everything I had into the motion. To my surprise, the rod met nothing but air. It dissipated into shadows, leaving me off balance and exposed. The figure seemed amused, tilting its head again as if mocking my efforts. From the corner of my eye, I spotted my camera lying dormant on the floor. The faint glow of the screen flickered, and in that moment, an idea struck me. Maybe I could use the flash to blind it. I had to take the chance. With a surge of determination, I dived for the camera, snatching it up in one swift motion. I could feel the figure's breath on my neck, cold and unnatural. I didn't have time to think, so I pressed the button. The flash lit up the cabin in an instant. For a heartbeat, everything paused. The light revealed the creature's face in a moment of clarity. Couldn't he breathe? It had no mouth, just a twisted grimace where its features should be. Its eyes glinted furiously, and it lunged again, but this time, the flash momentarily stunned it. It flinched away, and I seized my chance. I bolted past it, heading for the door. My heart raced as I threw my weight against it, slamming it shut hard behind me. But in that moment of brief escape, I heard the whisper again, now shrieking, "You can't hide." That was worse than any fear. Something broke inside me, and I knew I had only delayed the confrontation. As I leaned against the door, catching my breath, I wondered if I had just angered it more. The noise outside intensified, and I realized I hadn't escaped. I was only getting started. Somewhere in the distance, a light flickered on. I barely registered it, but hope surged for a moment. I had to reach it. If the figure was ever going to chase me, I needed to stay ahead. I took a deep breath and stepped back. The night still hummed with danger, but I refused to let it claim me. I was going to uncover the truth behind those eyes. It was time to run. The moment I stepped outside, the darkness swallowed me whole. The air was thick, and every sound felt amplified. The rustling leaves, the distant owl calls, and the occasional snap of a twig unnerved me. I forced myself to move, sprinting toward the flickering light I had seen. I barely got 10 steps when I felt that unsettling feeling of being watched. I turned quickly, scanning the trees behind me. Nothing but shadows swayed in the wind. I cursed under my breath. My mind raced, concocting all sorts of scenarios. What if the figure was right behind me, stalking me through the underbrush? I focused back on the path. I had to get to the light. Every second felt like an eternity in the heavy silence. I pushed myself harder, the adrenaline fueling my legs. As I tried not to look back, I was hyper-aware of every noise around me. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft but deliberate, crunching against the dried leaves behind me. My stomach dropped. The fear clawed its way back, surging through my veins. Quickened my pace. The light was closer now, illuminating the trees and clearing some of the darkness. It flickered against the black, a beacon of hope. As I sprinted, I stumbled over a root, crashing to the ground. Pain shot through my ankle, but I bit down the urge to scream. From my position on the ground, I glanced back. There it was, shadowy and looming, moving with an uncanny speed. It paused. The glowing eyes locked onto me. I could feel the rage emanating from it, and I scrambled back to my feet, trying to ignore the throb of my ankle. I finally reached the edge of the clearing. The light was coming from a campfire, bright, dancing flames surrounded by 3 tents. Relief surged within me as I approached, but an unsettling knot formed at the back of my mind. I wasn't sure who or what would be around that fire. As I neared the camp, I finally dared to look back one more time. The figure stood just beyond the edge of the shadows. Still, it watched me, and for the first time I felt like prey being toyed with. "Help!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Is anyone there?" A figure emerged from the left of the firelight, a man, slightly disheveled but alert. He squinted into the dark, his face a mix of concern and confusion. "What's going on?" he asked. I rushed toward him, breathless. "There's something in the woods. I need help." Just as he started to respond, a gathering of other campers emerged from their tents, drawn by my frantic voice. But before anyone could react, the fire flickered violently, casting erratic shadows across the clearing. Then the fires went out. The darkness crashed down on us, and in that moment, I felt the weight of dread return. I couldn't see the figure anymore, but I could sense it closing in. Fear wrapped around us like a suffocating blanket, and I understood whatever was out there was now among us. There was nowhere to hide, and somewhere in the silent woods, the footsteps had started again. Couldn't see a thing. The darkness was so thick it felt like it had substance. I strained my eyes, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything, but it was just black. Panic surged through me. I turned to the campers who had gathered around. Their faces were pale and wide-eyed. "Stay calm," the man who had first approached me shouted, but his voice shook. "We need to stay together." I nodded, trying to ground myself. But just as I thought we might be safe, I heard it again, the footsteps, this time closer. My heart raced even faster. I could feel the tension in the air, a silent agreement that we were all afraid. "What was that?" a woman whispered, her voice cracking. Fear had spread like wildfire among us. "Maybe it's an animal," another camper suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. Before anyone could argue, a soft rustle came from the tree-line. My breath hitched. I stared into the dark, willing my eyes to adjust. Just then, the campfire flickered back to life, only it was a weaker flame, like it was struggling to stay alight. The dancing shadows around us returned, but the darkness beyond the light felt even deeper now. And this time, the rustling turned into low growls. "Did you hear that?" I gasped. The campers all leaned closer together, their eyes darting nervously. I could sense that my own fear was echoing back to them, feeding into the chaos. The man who had stood by the fire took a step toward the edge of the clearing, peering into the night. "Maybe we should just check it out?" he said, his voice failing to hide the tremor. "Could be harmless." "No," I blurted out, suddenly terrified at the thought of being separated. "We need to stay here. What if it's dangerous?" But my protest seemed to do little to calm the others. Slowly, they moved, inching toward the shadows, drawn by whatever was lurking just out of sight. I fought the urge to follow but felt an overwhelming compulsion to root myself, to not be part of whatever was brewing in the dark. Then, in an instant, a pale shape darted across the edge of the clearing, just beyond the firelight. I gasped, and the others froze, their eyes wide. "What was that?" someone murmured, their voice barely above a whisper. I stared, straining to make out the figure. It moved again, this time closer. My stomach turned as it emerged from behind a tree, a slouched figure with long limbs and an unnatural gait. Its face was obscured in shadow, but I could see the glint of something sharp in its hands. "Run!" I yelled, instinctively grabbing the nearest person's arm and dragging them backward. The campers scrambled. Some dove toward the tents, while others sprinted for the thick woods behind us. I didn't know where to go. My mind raced as I pulled the man away from the figure, back toward the path. "Where do we go?" he shouted, desperation in his eyes. That's when I saw it. A path leading deeper into the woods, barely visible under the moonlight. That was our only chance. "Over here," I called, and we made a break for it. But as we sprinted down the path, I felt the shadows close in around us, and the footsteps, heavy and relentless, pursued from behind. I pushed through the thick brush, branches snapping against my arms. All around us, the darkness pressed in, thick and alive. I could still hear the sounds of people running, panic echoing in their footsteps, but the relentless pursuit behind us drowned it out. I didn't dare look back. "Keep moving," I shouted, trying to believe my own words. The man I dragged behind me stumbled but caught himself, breathing heavily. I glanced over my shoulder just in time to see a flicker of movement in the shadows, not from the campers but from something else. Something much darker. My heart raced as we tore down the path, your eyes focused on the thin sliver of moonlight ahead. It almost felt like we were running through a tunnel, the trees looming over us like silent sentinels. My thoughts spun in all directions. What was that creature? Was it following us, or had we lost it? Would we get separated? The man beside me, I realized, was a stranger. I had no idea who he was, but right now he was my only ally in this nightmare. "What's your name?" I yelled. "Mark," he shouted back, his voice strained. "Mark, hold on to me," I said. Just as I turned, my foot caught on a root, and I stumbled forward, pulling Mark with me. We hit the ground hard, gasping for air. The sound of heavy breathing filled the silence. It was closer now. I felt the panic in my chest swell, choking me. "We had to get up. Get up," I yelled, pushing myself off the ground. Mark barely nodded as he scrambled to his feet. We continued down the path, running blindly. Suddenly, I noticed the air changing. The chill deepened and a foul smell crept in. It hit me like a wave, invasive and nauseating. I stopped, instinctively covering my nose. "Did you smell that?" I panted, glancing at Mark. He nodded, his face pale. "What is it?" Before I could answer, a loud crash shattered the quiet. Something large moved through the trees, not just one figure but several, jolting branches, and thudding steps merging into a horrifying cacophony. Every instinct screamed at me to run faster, but my legs felt frozen in place. "Which way?" Mark shouted, panic rising in his voice. I could barely think. "We have to keep going straight," I said, motioning to a narrow space that seemed like a clearing ahead. I bolted forward, dragging Mark with me. As we entered the clearing, I noticed other campers were huddled together, but the chaos of their voices faded as we drew closer. Their attention was fixed on something in the shadows, something beyond the fire's flickering glow. Attention hung heavy in the air, a shared fear. That when I saw it, a pair of glowing eyes peering from the trees, unblinking. My breath caught in my throat. Those eyes were not alone, more followed, gleaming like stars in the dark. We weren't just being hunted. We were surrounded. "Stay back," I shouted, holding my arms out protectively. But I couldn't help it. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped back, feeling the pull of a dark void behind me. What had we stumbled into? The glow of the eyes shifted, revealing shapes lurking just beyond the trees. I couldn't process how many there were, but the weight of their gaze felt suffocating. The scattered campers had retreated to the edges of the clearing, murmurs spiraling into panic. "Everyone, stay calm," I shouted, voice cracking. My attempt at control felt futile as the figures inched forward, their movements deliberate, almost methodical. Mark was still at my side, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "What do we do?" he asked, fear evident in his voice. I shifted slightly, trying to put more space between us and the encroaching darkness. I could see shapes coalescing, twisting in the shadows, their bodies just out of sight but emitting a low growl. "We can't just stand here," I said, my heart racing anew as the idea of flight coursed through me. "We have to get back to our tents." "The lights, are you insane?" Mark interrupted, a look of disbelief on his face. "You want to run into the dark? Look." Before I could argue, a loud snap echoed through the clearing as something charged through the brush. The campers screamed, scattering in all directions. My instincts kicked in. "Follow me," I shouted, grabbing Mark's arm before he could bolt the other way. We sprinted back toward the path we came from, the chaos behind us fueling our adrenaline. As we raced away, I could hear guttural snarls mixing with the sound of rushing feet. Each breath I took grew heavier. The stench from earlier intensified like an old, rotting meal left out in the sun. "Where do we go?" Mark yelled, looking frantically around. I had no answers, only a sense of dread that clung to me like a wet blanket. "Just keep running," I shouted back, trying to force my legs to move faster. But the trees felt like they were closing in, branches reaching out to snag us. My mind was racing, trying to remember the way back to any sort of safe haven. Then, in a flash of clarity, I remembered the campfire pit where everyone had gathered earlier. "To the clearing," I yelled. "We can get there and find something to defend ourselves with." From behind us, the sound of snarling grew louder, the melody of darkness growing ever closer. I risked a glance back, and what I saw sent terror coursing through me. Shadows were now semi-formed, figures that had legs, arms, real shapes running on all fours, fast and sleek and far too human-like. A sharp turn led us deeper into the woods, the chilling realization hitting me. They were following us, not just as hunters but as predators. The sound of our footsteps was drowned out by the low growls that seemed to echo all around us. "Stay close," I urged Mark, our frantic pace matching the rhythm of pounding hearts. Then, without warning, everything went silent. The woods enveloped us in an eerie hush, the kind that sends shivers down your spine. My breath caught as I stopped, scanning the surroundings. "Why did it stop?" Mark whispered, eyes darting around. "That can't be good," I said, dread pooling in my stomach. And just like that, out of the silence, a low growl emerged, echoing around us. Our pursuers were still there, just waiting for the right moment. I felt a sudden urge to run, but we were frozen. And then I heard it, a voice carried on the wind, soft yet menacing, saying, "You think you can escape?" Dread washed over me. This nightmare was far from over. The air crackled with tension, suffocating in its silence. I felt the weight of unseen eyes bearing down on us, and my instincts screamed for action. I turned to Mark, who was pale and trembling. "We need to move, now." But he hesitated, scanning the trees like they might offer some kind of truth. What if it's a trick? What if they're just waiting for us to run? I didn't have time to debate. Without letting myself think too much, I dashed into the darkness, my feet pounding against the forest floor. "Come on," I yelled, hoping he'd follow. The silence broke again, sharp and sudden, as the growling returned, echoing off the trees. It must have been close, too close. I stumbled, nearly losing my footing but managing to catch myself. My eyes darted around, searching for any sign of our pursuers. Mark finally caught up, his face strained. "Which way?" In a panic, I remembered some of the paths I had noticed during the day hikes. "Left. Just follow me." We veered off the main trail, the underbrush tugging at our clothes and skin as we plunged deeper into the dark woods. The moonlight flickered through the canopy, creating ghostly shapes that danced in the shadows. I could hear them again, the sound of paws skimming the ground, the low growls rising with an almost sinister harmony. It was beyond unnerving, and despair clawed at my mind. There was no real escape, just the illusion of speed. I noticed a faint glow in the distance, a flickering light that looked promising. "There's something up ahead," I called, the spark of hope igniting a surge of adrenaline. "Let us go." As we approached, the light took form, illuminating an old, rusted sign. "Camp Mason Safety Zone." Relief washed over me until I realized the camp appeared deserted. The fire pit was overgrown, the logs disassembled and scattered. "Where is everyone?" Marcus' voice wavered, and I could hear his breath struggling to keep calm. "I don't know. Maybe they left after the disturbance." Or my thoughts trailed off as the growls grew louder, reverberating through the trees like a haunting symphony. Then came the snap of a twig so loud it felt like a gunshot. My heart lurched, and I turned just in time to see a shape break through the brush. It was different from the others, taller, more defined, and unmistakably humanoid despite the animalistic movements. Without thinking, I grabbed a nearby piece of wood from the remnants of the fire pit, swinging it instinctively toward the creature. "Get back," I shouted. My voice felt weak and shaky, Yet the creature paused, eyes gleaming like molten gold. "Did you see that?" Mark gasped, his face twisted in terror. "Yes, and we need to run," I replied, adrenaline spiking as the creature tilted its head, almost curiously. Then it drew closer, low growls vibrating the ground. I gritted my teeth, backpedaling until I stumbled over something. A discarded backpack half buried in the leaves. As I scrambled to my feet, I caught sight of a small flashlight inside it. Desperation fueled my actions as I snatched it up, flicking it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing shadows shifting beyond the trees. I aimed the light at the creature, and in that instant, it froze, letting out an unsettling growl that echoed into the night. "It doesn't tee like the light," I declared, glancing at Mark. "We have to keep it on them and find a way out." Before I could move further, another voice broke through the stillness. "You're in our territory now." Everything spun within me, my breath hitching in my throat. I spun to face the sound, heart racing. I knew we weren't alone anymore, and suddenly, the situation felt far worse than I ever imagined. "You're in our territory now." The words hung ominously in the air, and instantly, I felt trapped. The voice came from a figure emerging from the darkness, another human? No, it was just as grotesque as the shadowy creature that had chased us. It stepped forward, eyes shimmering with a sinister glow. "What do you want?" I croaked, gripping the flashlight tighter. The creature didn't answer. Instead, it cackled, a sound so unnatural that I could feel it reverberate through my bones. Before I had the chance to react, the growls around us became a chorus, echoing from all directions. They were surrounding us now, shadows shifting menacingly against the pale glow of the moonlight. I turned to Mark, whose face was a mask of confusion and terror. "We need to escape," I shouted, scanning the edges of the clearing where the trees grew thicker. "We can't just run," he replied, panic seeping into his voice. Suddenly, the shadowy figures moved as one, a wave of darkness sweeping toward us. I felt time slow as my heart raced. Instinct kicked in. I whipped the flashlight toward the advancing figures just in time to see them recoil slightly at the light, their forms momentarily wavering. "Over there, the woods," I shouted, pointing to the left, where the underbrush looked less dense. Without waiting for Mark to respond, I took off, racing into the trees. I could hear the crunching beneath my feet, each step marked by the sounds of pursuit behind us. The flashlight beam bobbed erratically as I ran, but I dared not look back. I didn't half to the growls were getting fainter, but the dread lingering in my mind told me they weren't far behind. The air felt thick, almost electric, and each breath drew deeper into my lungs as I pressed on, hoping against hopes that we'd outrun the darkness. After what felt like an eternity of sprinting through the sagging branches, I collided with something hard, icy, and strangely solid. I stumbled back, falling onto the ground, heart racing as I looked up. It was a cabin, dilapidated and hidden beneath a mountain of ivy. It looked abandoned, but at that moment, it felt like salvation. "Mark, this way," I shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the door. "Are you sure?" he said, glancing nervously back toward the darkness we had fled. "No time," I insisted, pushing him inside while my instincts screamed that we needed cover. Inside, the air was damp and musty, the remnants of someone's past life littering the floors. Old furniture lay askew, but we couldn't linger. I moved to a dusty window, peering outside. Shadows danced along the trees, weaving ominously against the pale moonlight, but the sounds seemed to dissolve into the distance. Maybe we lost them, I hoped aloud, but the weight of uncertainty loomed over me. "Hurry," Mark whispered, his voice shaky. "We can't stay here." We searched the cabin for anything to barricade the door. I piled up a few broken chairs, while Mark grabbed a rusted axe leaning against a wall. Uncertainty gnawed at me. Was this darkness ever going to end? The cabin creaked around us, and for a moment, it felt eerily quiet. We caught our breath, and with each beat of silence, I could feel my heart thunder in my chest. "Those things, what are they?" Mark asked, his eyes wide with fear. I don't know, I admitted, panic creeping back in. But they feel unnatural. Suddenly, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. A figure darted past the window. I slammed my back against the wall, heart racing. Did you see that? Mark nodded but let out a shaky breath. What do we do now? I leaned forward to catch a glimpse outside to see if we were still safe. There just outside the beam of light. I saw them again, those glowing eyes, endless, watching us like prey. In that moment, the whispers began again, growing stronger, more insidious. Come out. Join us. Their voices swirled together, and I pressed my hands against my ears, fighting back against the urge to comply. I can't, I muttered to myself, shoving deep breaths into my lungs. We can't. With a final rush of adrenaline, I turned back towards Mark. We need to make a break for it, head to the main trail and find help. Before I could explain any further, I braced myself against the door, ready to act. Mark hesitated, and fear coursed through me. Now, I yelled, my voice a mix of fear and urgency. With a great shove, I flung the door open and sprinted into the night, pulling Mark behind me. The terror-driven adrenaline propelled us toward the distant pinprick of light filtering through the dark trees. The path beyond, the only chance at survival. The growls rose behind us, echoing like a hunter's call. But this time, I didn't look back. The voices faded into the background, mingling with my frantic thoughts. Could we escape, or were we forever bound to our pursuit by those insatiable shadows? As we fled, I couldn't help but wonder what awaited us ahead. There was no answer to the madness we faced. Only the darkness that loomed behind and the flickering light drawing us toward whatever lay in wait. It would never truly be over. Would we emerge, or were we already lost? The shadows swirled around, and as we ran toward the light, it felt like their whispers mingled with the wind, forever lingering, leaving me questioning what was real and what lingered just beyond the line of sight.